Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Do I Have Time For This? The series that looks at old and new video games from indie to AAA and everything in between to help you figure out if you got the time to play, finish, 100% complete a game, or to just leave it in your backlog to forever gather dust. Today we're looking at the new Compulsion Games IP set in the American Deep South, south of midnight. From the start, this game was marketed around its unique visuals, featuring a Tim Burton-esque stop-motion animation style alongside a hand-drawn and dark art style. This game had been shown on Xbox's showcases for a while, but we'd never seen much in terms of the gameplay until recently. Dropping day and date on Game Pass, this is a very story-heavy game, rich in atmosphere, and you can tell that this was the main focus in development, getting that feel just right. During an unnaturally rough storm, our protagonist Hazel Flood and her mum Lacey are caught up in Washdown River, and when Hazel sees something she can't believe to be real, she's whisked away into the world of the supernatural, all in an effort to save her mother, and learn some dark family secrets along the way. If you want to see more videos like this in the future, don't forget to subscribe, and let's dive into this deep, dark story of loss, regret, family, and massive monsters.
My salvation.
A talking fish? Nope. Ain't no way.
You can buy us that pants.
Given that South of Midnight leans heavily on its story and art style, and that they're the strongest part of the game, it only seems fair to switch up my usual style and discuss these strong aspects first, before diving into my issues with the gameplay itself. First and foremost, I've said in the past that we're missing unique games, new IP with their own individual flavour, with the industry relying on sequels and spin-offs to keep them afloat. I can only praise Compulsion Games for trying something new and creating this narrative and world to feel fully fleshed out and lived in, with its own individual lore and stories based off folklore. The art style is incredible, with the characters, animals and enemies all being modelled in clay maquettes to create a stop-motion art style, running at an intentionally lower frame rate than the rest of the game to make it truly unique. The fact this was done for boss enemies as well as the individual characters is crazy, and you can tell so much effort went into this. Whether it's the human characters or the twisted hate monsters known as the Haints, each character model drips with detail. Their movements just slightly off as intended to make it seem otherworldly. The bosses themselves, which I'll skirt around so as not to spoil them all, are often huge in scale, with scales, feathers and bones protruding as twisted abominations, but all with a seemingly human element behind the eyes. There's an introductory claymation sequence right before getting into the game menu, which really flexes the different animation techniques Compulsion used to get the game running, and it's such a wow, this is beautiful moment before you get into the actual game. The performance itself of all of this stuff going on at once is actually pretty good. I did have some frame drops in the bigger areas towards the end, but this was with an uncapped frame rate. At 60 FPS, everything ran pretty smoothly on my PC. There's a significant amount of stuff going on screen at any given time, whether it be the corruption of the evil known as the Stigma, the particle effects from Hazel's spells, or different foliage blowing in the breeze, and this game takes it in stride. There's something really satisfying in seeing the corruption melt away to reveal blooming colourful flowers in its place, just more signs that art was high on the priority list. The music is also incredibly good, with bespoke musical numbers, with lyrics, having been created for the game. These musical numbers catch the southern vibe perfectly, with blues inspiration and a lot of guitar and piano.
Feel some piano. That's piano! I said piano!
The fact they made these songs that set the scene for a boss battle or new character encounter is so fun, and they've tailored the music to be creepy or bombastic to help give some idea about what you're about to face, or extra gravitas to the gameplay sequence you're in. Starting with the story, I was actually taken aback at just how dark and mature it was. I expected this to be one of those tongue-in-cheek with a slightly darker side type romp, but as it turns out, the main focus of the story is loss and grief. Whilst Hazel traverses the swamps and woods of the south, she bumps into different characters and creatures, each contributing in their own way to the tainting of the land by the stigma. Hazel will, through the gameplay I promise we'll get onto soon, see the backstories of these creatures and see how they came to be what they are now. These subject matters vary massively, but all follow in the same tragic setup, whether it be losing a parent, abuse, or some other dark, mature topic. I'm happy to say these are all handled properly and with the correct level of respect. You'll not find Hazel quipping after seeing a tragic death or someone being neglected, nor will you immediately be thrust into combat following a cutscene, giving you time to process what you've just witnessed. The overall story arc itself about Hazel getting her mum back branches into all sorts of places, getting her to understand her mother's state of mind, the things she has to deal with every day, and learn some family secrets along the way. Characters for the most part are well fleshed out and fully realised, but also very well voice acted. You can tell these people are from the deep south rather than voice actors putting on an accent.
Hello, Ross. This is Dr. McNeely from the Fake Accent University. We'd like you to come on board with us full time.
Now to get on to the most disappointing part of this game, and the systemic issue with the South of Midnight as a whole, the actual gameplay. To be frank, the gameplay in South of Midnight just isn't very good. It's nothing new that we haven't seen in many other third-person adventure games a million times, and it just ends up being outright boring by the end. Firstly, the combat. This is your standard third-person melee combat. You have a melee attack, a charged melee attack, a dodge, and a handful of spells. Now over the first few hours of the game, you'll unlock all the relevant spells you'll ever have, with the upgrade to said spells being iterative and making them more powerful without changing how they actually play. This means that the combat from hour 4 is going to be exactly the same as when you reach hour 10. Essentially, you are just using spells and waiting for the cooldowns as you dodge the either extremely telegraphed attacks or the attacks that come out so fast you have no way of dodging it. The enemy variety is very limited, and you'll be fighting the same humanoid starter enemy in your first fight as you'll be fighting in the final fight of the game. Whilst there are 6 enemy types not including bosses, the majority of what you fight are the same ones over and over, and it just gets extremely dull. The camera is also abysmal, where I found it to be slightly easier to not lock onto targets at all, as it wasn't intuitive enough to snap to the one you're hitting, instead of being locked on a ranged enemy halfway across the arena. I think Compulsion were aware of this, as they added warning indicators for the enemy attacks from off screen, but the wind up on some of these attacks are so long, you'll dodge away only to find they weren't going to hit you for ages anyway. When in combat, you're locked into a small arena, which has a green healing orb in it if you happen to struggle with the enemies and need to heal. Once you've cleared the arena, you clear the corruption by untangling it and you're free to move on. And this is where the main gameplay loop of South of Midnight makes this incredibly engaging and complex emotional story a slog to get through. Essentially, you will do some platforming to reach an open area. In this area there will be multiple nodes of stigma for you to clear. Each of these nodes will require a basic puzzle or a combat arena to remove it. Then you'll see a short cutscene explaining the character or monster of the area and how they came to be affected by negative emotions. Once you clear all nodes, you'll be locked into a chase scene that requires incredibly basic platforming and falls extremely flat. The problem is, as I said earlier, the combat is incredibly boring and by the numbers, and you have to engage with it to progress the story. On top of this, the well-crafted story parts can be done in any order, which oftentimes for me resulted in me seeing the instigating incident first, then seeing the build-up after, meaning some of these story moments and character motivations fell somewhat flat or didn't have the correct level of setup. My suggestion would have been to make these nodes operate in a linear fashion, meaning the story moments don't get jumbled up, but that still wouldn't solve the problem of the mundane and often unpleasant combat. The chase sequence is also devoid of all threat and stress. In most game chase sequences, you feel legitimately threatened by what's chasing you as they establish the threat. Here they just show you some purple mist and tell you to run, that's it. There is loud music that makes it a bit more dramatic, but there's not any damage to the environment or anything to make you worry. You just platform along a static path to the end. This makes the majority of the gameplay loop just flat and boring apart from the story beats, and platforming doesn't really fare much better. Like with the combat spells, you get everything you need for traversal within the first couple of hours, so there's never any evolution of the platforming abilities you have or what you actually do, and the hazards and threats never advanced in that respect either. In terms of exploration, You can go off the beaten path a little bit, with some extra platforming parts or little holes where your doll friend can go and walk through. These sections are mainly to provide some extra XP on top of the combat, and it will be necessary to get them all if you're trying to fully upgrade your abilities, but given how small these upgrades can be, it's not really necessary to get them. Also, sometimes you walk around a corner and find 20 XP, then you can do a whole platforming section and get 5 XP. The rewards don't always match the time and effort you put in. You can also get collectibles which add a little story context, but they're mostly in plain view on the main path, so they're fairly hard to miss. Finally, in terms of gameplay, I wanted to quickly cover the boss fights. These are very hit and miss gameplay sections which feel very big in scale, not just from the size of the actual boss, but also the music and effects on screen are very impressive. That being said, the majority of the time, you'll just be waiting for an opening, dodging a few attacks, then the boss just sits there and waits for you to do the thing that makes it vulnerable for you to attack it. Their phase changes are also just adding one more attack to the rotation or slightly changing the arena size. Nothing you'd call out as being particularly innovative. The only thing I will say here is, there's one boss that's pure combat that was significantly more engaging than the rest, but given the combat isn't the best anyway, it was the best of a bad batch. The bosses all look incredible and have really deep and complicated backstories, they just aren't that interesting or fun to fight. So let's get down to it. How long does this game take? I completed one playthrough of South of Midnight, grabbing almost every collectible and XP boost off their beaten path, and I clocked in at 12 hours. For the main story, skipping what little side content there is and forging ahead, it's 9 hours. If you're looking to fully complete the game, getting all of the collectibles and situational achievements, this will take you around 14 hours. As I said, the achievements in this game are extremely situational, so the time it may take you to unlock them will vary between players. You need to be very specific on what actions you do to defeat enemies, as a large amount of them are beat enemies with a certain combat move. The only achievements I'd be worried about is you're expected to defeat the bosses of the game without taking any damage at all. There are guides out there, but it's something to be conscious of. It'll take some time to learn those boss patterns and attacks. In terms of time taken, this is a pretty short game, with a brisk pace aside from a bit of a dip in the middle of the story. The autosave is fairly generous, but the lack of a manual save may mean some people who need to quickly step away or have short gaming sessions may want to plan out and dedicate some time to actually playing it. For value, this game is on Game Pass and I'm thankful for it. The price of this game outside of Xbox Game Pass is £40, and whilst this is a fairly tight experience with a great story, I don't believe this is worth the asking price, but for free, I'd say the value is offset a bit. Unfortunately, as a video game, I can't recommend South of Midnight. Even when being offered on the Xbox Game Pass service, I don't believe there's enough value here in terms of gameplay to warrant the time you're spending. I love the art style, environments, lore, world building and story, but all of this is brought down significantly by how boilerplate, dull and repetitive the gameplay is. The combat, camera and platforming are the only real gameplay additions to this story, and they're all flawed or basic. I went from loving playing the game to being bored by it by around the 5-hour mark, once I realised this was all the game was going to be, and whilst I wanted to see where the story was going, I wasn't looking forward to doing the next combat sequence in order to see it. The gameplay makes South of Midnight feel like a slog to see the best part about it, the story. You can turn the combat all the way down in story mode, but honestly, I think the best way to experience this game is to just watch a supercut of the cutscenes on YouTube and bypass the actual gameplay itself, as it has nothing in terms of narrative, challenge, or intrigue. I'm all for new IP, but why couldn't this have been an animation Tim Burton style rather than being a game? Compulsion Games clearly had a story they wanted to tell, but this medium wasn't the best place for it, and without a complete overhaul to the platforming and combat systems, I don't see how a sequel could do much to change the game and put the series on a better path. It's so unfortunate. Do you have time for South of Midnight? On this channel I like to give my thoughts on the game alongside a bit more of a deep dive on the time you have to invest, so you know what you're getting into, because time is precious, right? If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, feel free to like and share. If you subscribe, I'm looking to put out regular content like this alongside some more in-depth video essays and freeform videos, so stick around, and if you have any requests on future videos, just drop them in the comments. And finally, if you want to come chat with me, you can find me over on x.com/gracious_rhino. I'm Gracious Rhino, look after each other, and I'll catch you soon.